Hello, hello. I am, do you know what? By now, y'all have realized that I am consistently excited to be learning with you all today. And today, we are going to be just talking through some of the concepts we've learned about CSS. And this is going to be a lot more learner led. Well, hopefully, y'all feel like you've been leading stuff. But as we're going through and just talking through some of these things, please, please, please let me know if there's anything you want to stop and talk about, stop and look at, stop and ask questions about. And for the rest of this week, that's kind of going to be live. So we're going to be going back and saying, hey, what are y'all's questions? What projects or what pieces of work do you want to look at in a bit more detail? What can we work through together? So someone very rightly pointed out that I say this a lot, but the whole world is stressful right now and everything is difficult. So this next week, we're just going to hang out and see how we can make things easier. We looked at this really, really briefly on Friday, but one of the remaining projects that we're going to be working on is building a personal portfolio. A personal professional portfolio? And this has been set up as a lab and not a certification project. And if I was the boss, if I was the boss of Free Code Camp, I would not be doing as good a job as Quincy is. But I'd recommend treating this more like a certification project than you would treat it a lab, just because your ability to then take this code and put it live on the web and have your very own portfolio project is probably going to be one of the more valuable labs, one of the more valuable projects we've worked together on Free Code Camp. So here we've got a really, really tight example of what theirs looks like. And there are some user stories, some requirements to get this to pass. But once you get this working in the environment, I'd strongly encourage you to go ahead and think about, hey, I want to take this portfolio project and put it somewhere else and use it myself. But we are going to have a very, very chilled out time. Please, at any point, yell. Well, I guess yelling in text is a bit challenging. Please let us know what, if any of these, you'd like to talk about a bit more. So just to review CSS, just to review all of CSS, here's some of the things we looked at. We looked at CSS basics, sort of the concept of CSS as a separate file, CSS as a separate language, CSS as the sort of styling rules for how we approach. Like if HTML is the content on our page, CSS are the styles that we apply to that content. Oh gosh, I'm going to do this as a little, so I'm so sorry that I'm going to review by asking y'all, but we learned about inline, internal, and external CSS. Which one of those do you generally want to use most of the time? Do you want to write your CSS in line with your HTML? Do you want to write it internally in your HTML file, maybe at the top? Or do you maybe want to write it as a separate file, external CSS, which you then link to in your HTML file? So out of all of these, absolutely, Mel's just immediately like external. We're going to go ahead and separate out those concerns for a bunch of different reasons. First of all, Daniel as well. Daniel's like, Jess, come on. This was like 5 weeks ago, but I still remember. And now, exactly, I was about to say we do this because you can reuse it across different, so it's a more efficient way to write it. But also, if you've got your CSS tucked in with all your HTML, it's going to be a lot, sort of a heavier cognitive workload to try and figure out what that code is doing, to change it. And everything's stressful enough already. We want to go ahead and keep things as easy as possible. We learned about giving width and height to our elements or to our pages overall. We talked about different types of CSS combiners. So saying, oh, I want to target the element that's the div that is that is the H2 that is the child of a div. We can do that. Or the child combiners. We learned about how different HTML elements by default have different amounts of space they want to take up. That some of them are inline, and they'll park next to each other. Some of them are block, where they want to take a ton of space. And some of them are inline block, where they'll sort of halfway between the two. We learned about margins, and margins are like the margins on a document. They're the space outside of your element. And you can give yourself more space outside your element by increasing the margins. And we also learned about padding. So padding is the space inside your element, that sort of white space, or if your element is pink, pink space. And I like to think of that as like the bubble wrap inside your element, giving it a bit more space in there. CSS specificity. We learned that CSS will read and apply from the top down as it reads the file, unless it has different levels of specificity. We did like a little exercise with tally marks. We're like, okay, oh gosh, I'll ask you, what are the different types without the combiners? What are the different types of way we could target an element? So we've got type. So we can target an element by type. Say I want to apply the CSS rule to all of the H2s. We could apply CSS rules to a class. We could apply them to an ID. Yeah, we've got a whole, and the more specific a CSS rule is, the more specific that CSS selector is, the stronger it is. So if there's two different clashing CSS rules, the more specific one will win. We learned super duper quickly about some really big picture design terminology terms. So stuff like user stories and user research. We learned really, really quick basics on UI design fundamentals. So a user interface, how to design an interface on your website for users to use. We quickly just glanced over design best practices. So what kind of concepts can we apply to our design? I don't think we did this very much at all. What are some common design tools? So we just briefly sort of touched on, there's a bunch of different design tools, but what are some common design tools that maybe some of y'all have heard of people using? And we'll come back and look at those. We learned about absolute units, which are always the same size. They're like an inch of paper or a cup of sugar. An inch is an inch is an inch, and a cup is a cup is a cup. And we also learned about relative units, rem and m, and viewport width and viewport height to say, hey, these are set units of measurement, but they relate either to another element, maybe the size of a standard line of text, or to the viewport, the window that your user is using. We learned about functions. I'm just typing out the, oh gosh, Figma. So talking about, hey, what kind of design tools have y'all? Figma is really popular these days, huh? So a lot of people using Figma. I'm the age I am. So back in my day, it was still fun. Back in my day when I was first building my first website, it was MS Paint, but that's a separate thing. Yeah. Is Draw.io open source as well? Somebody else is saying, hey, Draw.io is really useful for me. So we learned about CSS functions generally, and those will always have the syntax function name. Oh, yeah, and Canvas a design. Absolute, thank you. Y'all are very, very patient with me being like, I don't do as much design. What kind of tools are we using these days? So we learned about the calc function, which is, hey, I want to use a CSS rule that's set to a mathematical calculation. We learned about user action pseudo classes. So you could use like hover or click or active in conjunction with an element to say, hey, I want this div to turn pink when a user hovers over it with their cursor, which I thought was quite fun. We learned about location pseudo-classes to say, hey, I want to set a CSS rule, but only for the third child element in a div. Yeah. Yeah, so we've got folks pointing out as well that there's some LLM tools that can be used as image generators as well. Yeah, um, I tend not to use these personally just because I'm a bit of a Luddite, but they're really, really popular these days. Sorry, that's absolutely no judgment. That's just like, ooh, I've used Canva and Figma and Draw.io, but I can't really speak to check any of the LLMs. We've also learned about tree structural pseudo classes. So pseudo classes that target elements within a certain place in the DOM structure, and functional pseudo classes to say, hey, do you know what? I don't remember functional pseudo classes at all. I'm going to look these up. I am just, oh, I've got a terrible connection, so this is going to take just a second. Okay, so I'm looking at new CSS functional pseudo class selectors is and where. Oh, God. Y'all can tell that this is Etta doing this behind the scenes just as I'm looking this up. Yes. Functional pseudo classes are things like is and has and where, and that's absolutely correct. Okay, so this is sort of a more efficient way to say if an element is an H1 or an H2. Right? Okay, cool. So a way to condense those selectors and make them work a bit better. Oh, I'm going to drop this into the chat. So we did learn about this, and to make it more silly, we did learn about this on a day I was here. We learned about pseudo elements and pseudo classes. We learned a little bit about color theory, and I am devastated that y'all got to learn about the different types of ways to specify color with Etta instead of with me, because I really like the color lessons. We learned about the box shadow property, so how to add a cute little shadow or conceptual shadow or a real conceptual shadow to our elements. We learned about gradients, giving us that ombre effect if we're into them. And we came back and a lot of the things we did in CSS felt like adding a bit on to the HTML we learned. And I was just putting in the chat, y'all shout at me if you have any questions about anything during this course or things you want to look at in more detail. But the whole rest of the week, we're just doing chilled out question and answer. Everything's okay. So a lot of what we looked at in CSS kind of felt like hopefully it felt like building on top of the things we learned in HTML. So we did a bunch of stuff with forms. We learned about the best practices for styling inputs. We learned about using appearance none as a way to override defaults and inputs. And hopefully I mentioned that we don't want to style custom inputs unless our boss insists we do. Especially common styling issues with date, time, local, and color properties. So if you get like trying to put in your own color picker, I want y'all to be happy. We don't want to do that. We learned about the CSS overflow and transform properties, ways to use CSS to do silly, strange things that it doesn't feel like it should always be able to do. We learned about the box model, which, sorry to be excited. I kept sort of saying, HTML is all boxes. HTML is all rectangles. We're just moving different conceptual rectangles around. And hopefully the box model helped made all of our rectangles feel a bit more rectangle-y. Read about margin collapse, how to get rid of those default margins we sometimes have on our site with browsers. Content box and border box property values. CSS resets, CSS filters. And very, very mercifully, with Carmen, y'all learned about CSS Flexbox, which is a really CSS Flexbox and the Flex model. Oh, so this is a good question. We're usually saying, hey, if we do build a form, we're probably going to need some kind of JavaScript in order to make them actually send that. And so if they're doing any kind of processing, yes, you're going to have some kind of server set up, some kind of database generally that things get sent to. And those can be, yeah, having some JavaScript can be helpful, but other types of programming languages that work with the web, it may be that you're using PHP with your forms. So right now we've learned about sort of the front end, HTML and CSS only ways to get a form to work. Secretly, there's probably a little bit of additional learning that we've got to do in order to actually make those forms connect to a back end in a useful way. Oh, that's a really good question. What do we think might be useful to learn next after you've finished with this course? After you've finished all the material from this course, which there's no hurry, there's no hard deadlines, everything's okay. So with CSS and Flex, we learned about the flex direction, what direction you want to flex things in, flex wrap, how to justify your content, how to align those. And we also learned about typography, how your text is going to look. So font families, fonts that are going to work on the web, at rules and the at font face rules. If you're using external font, so a font that's hosted somewhere else on the web, where do you get that and how do you link to that? So you usually get it probably from Google Fonts or a couple of other providers, and you link to it in a way that feels a lot like linking to your CSS, huh? We learned about the text shadow property, which is pretty cool, but can be a little inaccessible. It can make things look a little difficult to read. We learned about color contrast tools. Why is color contrast important? Clearly, you want to have good contrast between, let's say, your text and your background, or really your elements in your background and your elements and each other, because otherwise they're difficult to see. Yeah, it's really an accessibility issue that we want to make sure that folks can perceive the material that you've put on this website for them. We've learned about the accessibility tree, that there's folks using assistive technologies will have a navigable tree of this content, and we can include or exclude things from this tree where it's appropriate and meaningfully serves accessibility. We've learned about the max function, which is syntactically really similar to the calc. Functions always feel like functions. And we've learned some about the best practices with CSS and accessibility. So how are we going to do our color contrast? How are we going to test? We've learned about hiding things. So saying, hey, sometimes there's elements that we don't want to visually show on our material, or sometimes there's elements that we want to hide from the accessibility tree. We learned about placeholder attributes. So, hey, this is just a placeholder. We're going to come back to this. Isn't always the most accessible way to approach things. We learned about different attribute selectors and links. We learned about targeting elements based on their language. And the lang element, remember, that's setting the language that we expect will be useful for humans. Whereas the data lang attribute, we do the same thing. We can target elements with it. We tend to use the data lang attribute when we're talking about data we think that machines are going to ingest. We talked about the attribute selector or list elements and the type attribute. We've talked working with floats, and remember that floats were, oh gosh, that's presumptuous to say. Remember that floats were great. They were like, push this to the left, push this to the right. We learned about static positioning, what's always going to stay the same, relative and absolute positioning, and fixed, it's going to stay here, or sticky, it's going to stay here even while we scroll. Y'all, we learned so much. This is exhausting. How did y'all do this for 10 weeks? Like, thank you. I appreciate it, but this is too much. For me, I did this for 10 weeks, mostly by getting Edit to do all the hard work. And Carmen, of course. We learned about the z-index property. So when you have multiple elements sort of layered on top of each other, how to move them up and down in a stack to move them behind each other. We learned that responsive web design is the practice of designing your websites so they work for users on different size screens. We learned about, and sorry, this is as close to we'll get to a quiz. What was the name of the design concept? Design approach? For what size or what type of users we might want to design for first. So yeah, when we were talking about responsive web design, there was a concept saying, hey, we recommend that you, when you're starting to design your website, that you think about this type of user first, and then add users of other different types of viewport sizes. Who are they? We learned about media breakpoints, and that's a way that we could design for users using different size screens. And Mel's like, yeah, but these days, so many people are on their mobiles so much of the time that designing our websites for mobile first can be a really good way to make sure we're serving them best. Almost always, when you're writing code, you're going to be writing them from a desktop or from a computer with a keyboard when we can. I know some really, really great folks who do their development from a mobile, and it's hard. It's really hard. But by designing our web experiences for folks mobile first, it makes sure that we're keeping them in mind as we design from our big, big screens. We learned about common media breakpoints. So, hey, are we looking at this from a print approach? Mobile first approach. We learned about the ability to set custom properties using CSS variables and the @property rule for those custom properties. Helpfully, very helpfully, I did not teach you about CSS Grid because y'all would have done a rubbish job with CSS Grid if you had me teaching. And I know we've got a couple more days of sessions, so I don't want to pat myself on the back too early, but I think I might have gotten through this whole boot camp without accidentally swearing once. And that's because Carmen was kind enough to do CSS Grid with you all. I am really, really in awe of the power that CSS Grid gives us, but I often get a little bit frustrated. And CSS Grid was both a mental model and a technical system for drawing a real imaginary grid on our website, and then specifying where on that grid we want our elements to sit and how much space we want them to take up. We learned about CSS animation basics, which was really what I was here for this whole time. So those of you who were with us on Friday, thank you for your patience while you had to listen to me be excited about a waving penguin. And we learned that while I love CSS animation, it's not always the most accessible way to do things, both because it can be resource intensive for your users who are on a limited connection, and because it can make folks a little bit queasy. Or flashing animations can be really dangerous for folks. So we learned to use the preferred reduced motion media query to check and say, hey, for folks who have told us they want reduced motion, let's reduce the motion of our animations. Let's look in the chat and see, because I was asking, what do we think we might want to learn next? Yeah, so Mel was helpfully pointing out that if you want to continue to go through the free code camp curriculum, which you're so welcome to do, let's look. So we're going to be finishing up. And I know we went so fast through this. We didn't cover every single step. I would be very, very surprised if anybody was going to be finished by Friday. I would not be if I was doing this for the first time. But There's no hurry, there's no deadlines, your work isn't going to go away. When you've got the time to finish up this responsive web design certification, and really helpfully, oh, penguin, penguin, sorry, my apologies. So there's also, I'm so sorry, an exam. Oh, oh. So you'll need to generate, if you're interested in getting the certification, you'll need to generate an exam token and take an online exam, which is a little bit scary. I always get a little bit of a exam stress headache, but it can't hurt us. After the responsive web design certificate, the next one in this order is the JavaScript certification. You can take these out of order, but if you take the front-end libraries before JavaScript, that's not going to work especially well. So if you want to do front-end libraries like React, like Vue, I'd recommend doing JavaScript next, if that's okay. And Daniel as well was saying, hey, I think JavaScript would be useful. So yeah, we do also have a relational databases certification. And we got users saying, oh gosh, oh, maybe JavaScript or SQL, which is going to be this relational databases, about how to connect to that database. So yep, Bacon's just like, or we could do Python. I was like, fantastic. There's also a Python cert. Do you know what? I've been meaning to brush up my Python as well. So that might be my next step. All of y'all are grown-ups. All of you have done a stunning job managing your own learning and really, really great self-directed learning. And I've been absolutely delighted to be learning with all of you. But if I can softly recommend something just a little bit, once you finish the responsive web design certification, I'd really strongly recommend taking at least a week off. So say, hey, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to relax. This was a huge certification you did really, really quickly. I'm going to take a little bit of time to breathe and to let the sort of joy of having complete this sit with you. Right after this boot camp, I'm going to take a whole week off, and I mean, not a week off of web development, and go do something silly as a little reward task. So when you do get your certification, I recommend it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be a big thing. Do a teeny tiny thing to celebrate. Just go ahead and cement that dopamine if that's okay. So yeah. Oh, and folks are pointing out that, hey, it's not just free code camp that you might want to go to next to. There's other online learning resources. So Exercism is a really common one. Oh, thank you very much, Ada. Exercism.org. Grabbing that. So yeah, so it is, again, completely free, nonprofit. We love free nonprofit learning. And this is giving you little discrete, oh, look at these little discrete challenges to explore in different programming languages. So I really like this. Oh, we've got folks saying the Euler project is quite good as well. Oh, maths and computing problems. Oh, this is quite nice. So this is my own personal, y'all are going to be so excited to not have me constantly talking about a tab you can't see. Y'all who are into both maths and programming can enjoy Project Euler, whereas this is personally my own bespoke circle of hell. I am maths reluctant, cheerfully. Oh gosh, and Code Wars is a really nice one. We've got a whole bunch of different resources for, hey, what might be nice to learn next. The big thing is, does anybody have any questions or anything that I can go over in a bit more detail today that might make things easier for you, or just stuff you'd like to chat about or look at it? If not, we'll be here tomorrow. We'll be here Wednesday. We'll be here Thursday. We'll be here Friday. So if you're like, I don't have a question right now, that is also not a problem. We can look at stuff tomorrow. grab, while I'm waiting to see, because there's always a bit of a delay, while I'm waiting to see if any of you all have any questions, I'm going to look up. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Just as I was, I love how in the chat y'all have seen the fullstackopen.com address, because you could hear, Etta could hear me going, oh, I'm going to try and look up this program. And it's this is a completely free course. Oh gosh. Run by, is it the University of, who runs this? Okay, the names are suggesting this to be very Finnish. It's the University of Helsinki. It's the University of Helsinki runs this really exciting full stack program. Oh, so Daniel is really relatable in this. And Daniel's saying, hey, do you know what? My problem is because there's all these different things to learn. I'll be like, yes, now I'm going to do this. Now I'm going to do this. That is extremely relatable. I can't make you do anything. I wouldn't like to. But I promise that, humans, there's very few human universals. But the things we do love, we love dopamine. We love that little reward our brain gives us for finishing something. If you've done most of the responsive web design certification, going ahead and pushing as hard as you can to finish and getting that certification is going to feel pretty good, I bet. Yeah. Oh yeah, the Odin project's a really good one as well. There's a ton of really interesting programs you might want to try twice. Next. Sorry, y'all, the heat last week has cooked my brain. But for now, let's focus on wrapping up, making sure we've got all of the answers we're answering all the questions you have, and preparing you to learn what you want to learn next in a really chill way. So I'm not seeing so I'm seeing some lovely chat, and I love that, but not seeing a ton of questions that I can help you all with today. So if it's okay, I might go ahead and leave you a little bit early. We're going to be hanging out again tomorrow, and even more excitingly, it's Carmen tomorrow, so you're going to have the best time. I'll be back on Wednesday, and yeah, we're just going to make sure that sounds like very much like we're being bossy. We're just going to chill out with you and answer some questions. When I'm back on Wednesday, I might actually work on my own website and show you my workflows while I also answer any questions y'all might have. I'm going to let you go, and thank you so much for your time. And 10 weeks is a lot of time. Thank you for your time. I'll see you later this week. Bye, team.